Hi, everybody. John Haldy here, and I have a super guest with me today, Rahmel Wattley, founder and CEO of Truck and Hustle. Welcome.
Hey, John, how are you, sir? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for being here. I think that a good bit of our audience is probably familiar with your work, but just as background for somebody watching this who doesn't know about Truck and Hustle, is it fair to say that Truck and Hustle is the online community for transportation entrepreneurs?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that. I think that's fair. So we do a few different things. We started out as a podcast in 2019, just talking to entrepreneurs in transportation and logistics. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I owned a staffing business that I started in 2015 for CDL drivers, and I could tell you more about that later. But basically, the catalyst for the Truck and Hustle platform was a podcast, and now we've grown into like a full media company where we do like news, different types of content. We do live events, and also a community for a private community for transportation entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's kind of like what we do and what we're building over here.
But now, for clarity, I live in the line haul world.
Yep.
I got blinders on, and as far as I know, there's nothing else in transportation. But you cover the gamut to include line haul, P&D, ambulances, tow trucks, dump trucks, oil tankers, whatever it is. If it moves commercially, you guys are in the middle of talking about that and learning about that, right?
Yeah, for sure. So like I was saying earlier, man, I like to say that, everybody, Truck and Hustle is entrepreneurs in motion. So like you said, if it moves, if it's a commodity, we want to cover it. We want to talk about all the different niches and different verticals in the industry and just, make people aware of it. Number one, if they're not aware of it. And then number two, if people are building businesses in these spaces, give them resources in order to do so by providing them access to people who are doing it and also resources as well. So we like to just cover the whole gamut, man. Like you said, everything from the, B2B, like the traditional, trucking side, OTR and so forth and so on to B2C, where it's like more so like last mile delivery with like FedEx and so forth going directly to the end user. So we like to cover it all, man. And that's what I think has made us really stand out as a platform because we have such a vast people contributing to the information. It's really made us stand out from other platforms that usually just focus on like one niche.
I love this. For the record, today's April 15th, 2025. 1 week from today, I'm going to be in Dallas, and our big event of the year, the Line Haul Summit, is happening. And I have been living and breathing and doing nothing but thinking about line haul. So I am gloriously happy that we're not going to talk about line haul here, and I can think about something other than that.
Yeah.
So let me start by asking this, because you see kind of the whole transportation world going on. The easy question would be, are there pockets that are hotter than others? But more importantly, generally speaking, is transportation on an uptick? Is it on a downtick? Because we went through COVID and that was growth like crazy, right? What do you see going on now? As we speak, Trump is talking about tariffs, stock markets yo-yoing up and down. The consumer, some people say, is tapped out. Some people say has confidence. What are you seeing generally from all of your contacts in the transportation?
Yeah, ultimately, I guess the best word would be just uncertainty, right? Like everybody is very uncertain about what the next months to years will look like. Everybody kind of knows if you're in transportation or not, just through hearing the news, that, this industry is very volatile and it has been very difficult the last couple of years, right? A lot of carriers, we just have more supply than we have demand. Right, is ultimately the problem. After COVID, there were a ton of new authorities, new carriers getting into the industry, and there's just not enough demand for all those carriers. So that has obviously it's unbalanced, right? But at the same time, unfortunately, a lot of people have gone out of business now, and it's gonna probably balance it out at some point. But we still haven't seen the rainbow yet, man. We're still looking to kind of get there, but it's a lot of turmoil right now in the industry, I would say.
If you think of the gap between the available supply of trucking and the demand, as you mentioned, there was more supply than demand. There was a gap there. Do you feel like it's closed a little, or is it closing, or do you think it's still wide and it hasn't right sized in terms of overall U.S. fleet size?
I think it's closing because overall there's a net positive effect. There's a net positive of more carriers that are staying in than going out right now. So I do feel like it's starting to close a bit, but we're not quite there yet to where there's enough for all the carriers out there on the market.
Is that creating a buying opportunity for investors?
To buy into trucking companies?
To buy into trucking companies, to look for distressed sales if they've got the cash to weather the ride, because I'm sure some don't.
You know what? I mean, I think it does. I mean, I think it does if you have the wherewithal operationally to run the business, right? Like if you understand a niche or a segment of the industry that you can get into, that you can, find some good opportunities. I think there's definitely a buying opportunity there. But at the same time, I don't know if I mean, anytime where there's distress is always like a time to buy, right? When there's blood in the water, blood on the street, that's when you want to buy. So I guess that from that standpoint, I would say yes, but there's a lot of operational challenges that you have to face. So it doesn't, just because there's distress doesn't mean you want to hop in, because you still have to be able to get in there, operate the business and run a profitable business. But I have seen some acquisitions done recently where people are buying some distressed companies and they are turning them around, implementing the right tech. A lot of, trucking businesses are very antiquated and they just kind of run things in an old school way. You'd be surprised even in 2025 still. So just kind of coming in and putting in the right processes and the right systems can turn things around, and just having a clear strategy as opposed to kind of winging it, right, on a load board every day or just trying to figure it out day to day. So I think if you have the right leadership and the right ops people, you can definitely turn some of these companies around if they have some, contracts that are already existing and kind of make things a little bit more profitable.
You mentioned technology. I have a tech company.
Yep.
Believe me, I'm not surprised that there's a lot of trucking operators who don't embrace technology. Trust me, that's beaten into me at this point. Do you really think that technology can be transformative for a transportation company generally?
I mean, it definitely is, for sure. I mean, it's happening right before our eyes. I mean, we see everything going on with AI. If you're not keeping up with it, then, you're just going to get left behind. Everything is, becoming streamlined in business in general, right? People are downsizing, staff and manpower, and people are just running more lean, right? Just to have more profitability. So I think when you start streamlining things, you start adding in technology, there's less room for mistakes and error. And it's going to make the whole operation run smoother from an operational standpoint. So yeah, 100%. And I think it's been very difficult for our industry to embrace technology, just because I think, it's just the mindset is very antiquated. You have a lot of older businesses that have been around for, 150 to 100 plus years. And a lot of the leadership, a lot of times they just haven't adapted to the times, and they've been doing things the same way for a very, very long time. So it takes just, newer, fresh blood, innovative people, and just newer, fresher ideas to kind of come in and convince people that, hey, this is going to make the operation run tighter. It's going to be smoother. You're going to be more profitable and so forth. So it's just a bit of a learning curve that just takes time. But again, this industry is just an antiquated business that a lot of people just haven't just caught on to the tech yet. But it's going to happen. It has to happen, because if they don't adapt, they will eventually be they'll eventually be beat out by the people who are adapting the technology.
What do you think is going to happen with the self-driving? Do you think the driver might become a thing of the past at some point?
No, I could almost bet the farm that the driver will never become a thing of the past. However, I do see a place where the self-driving vehicles become an assistant to the driver. And because ultimately, if you have you're going just like an airplane, right? In an airplane, you have a pilot. The airplane is really landed by computers, right? The pilot really takes care of the takeoff and the landing, but everything kind of in between is automated, right? The pilot comes in at the end and the beginning, right? And I feel like that's going to kind of be the same thing with the trucking industry, because at the end of the day, there's so many manual moves that have to happen when you're driving a truck, especially when you go into these smaller cities. You're trying to get into these small docks in these areas that a computer will just like fry. It'll go crazy trying to figure this stuff out, man. And in addition to that, just the litigious nature of our society, you don't want to have a truck that's not manned by a person, because people just end up running in front of trucks and doing all kind of crazy stuff. And there's too much potential for lawsuits out there. So there's always going to have to have a driver in the truck. I definitely do see there being a world where there are, trucks operating a portion of the move, right? While you have a driver there kind of as a co-pilot, that's obviously going to help on like hours of service for the driver, and it's going to get goods moved faster and so forth and so on. But I don't ever see a world where there'll be just driverless trucks at all. We're just not ready for it. The infrastructure is not ready for it. I mean, we'd have to be like the Jetsons, right? Like everything's on a conveyor belt and just kind of moving automatically without any real world like traffic and so forth. So I don't ever see that happen. And especially, like I said, when you get into the urban areas, it's just not possible.
I've always laughed at the question somebody posed to me once. Okay, fully autonomous truck pulls into a gas station. Now what?
Yeah. Now what? I mean, these trucks, they're EV, right? They're electric vehicles and so forth. So it's like that's where they're trying to move things to, and even that, right? The infrastructure isn't there for EV yet either. Like they were talking about, trying to be electric by 2030. I mean, that's like tomorrow, right? So I mean, we're nowhere near that, and it's not going to happen. And a lot of the people who are making these rules and who are interested in, these transitions are just not close enough to the industry to understand what it's going to take to do that. It affects a lot of small businesses, number one, because of the price of these vehicles. Sorry about that. Number two, the infrastructure is not there or set up to charge these vehicles yet. So it's just so much that has to happen before we, go autonomous. But that is definitely the direction that the industry would like to go in, or certain people in the industry would like to go in. And it's all about money at the end of the day. It's all about the bottom line, just trying to be able to save on manpower and so forth. But it just won't happen. I don't see I don't think within our lifetime we'll see fully automated vehicles. I think they'll always be manned by some sort of driver or something. The whole infrastructure has to change in order to do that.
So knowing that you see a lot of different pockets, right? And you know a ton of people who've gotten into the space, who've gotten out of the space, who are in it.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've learned about the type of personality that's going to do well in the transportation industry? Or if it's easier, let's talk about the type of person that's not going to do well.
Oh man, we could talk about both. So one, I mean, you have to obviously be very resilient if you're going to be in the transportation industry, because of just the ebbs and flows and just the volatility of the business. And you have to be very adaptable as well to be able to, pivot and make changes, based on what you kind of see going on. You have to be well informed. Like, I tell people, man, if you're going to be in this industry, you have to make sure that you're reading, you're staying on top of what's going on, the different changes, because it's always just something new that's going to impact, that can impact your business. So I think those are like some of the key things that you have to be able to build a team, right? Because ultimately, if you can't build and lead a team, you're not going to be able to effectively run a business. There's so many parts to this industry, from the operations side, compliance side, making sure that you pick the right drivers and you have some sort of retention plan to keep drivers, because ultimately that's going to be the bloodline of your business. So you have to understand like that from a leadership perspective. There's just so many different moving parts. Go ahead.
When you talk about team, are you including drivers?
100%.
Okay.
100%. So when I say your team, I mean, like I just alluded to, the drivers are the bloodline of your business, right? If you don't have drivers, you don't really have a business. So you have to make sure that they are a very strong part of your team. You have to make sure you're taking care of them, and you have a plan to, number one, keep them motivated, keep them incentivized, and keep them safe, right? Because ultimately that's going to be what's going to keep your business, going to keep you making money, right? Those guys have to be safe out there. They have to know the job, and they got to be incentivized, because there's other people there's other places where they can go and work. So you have to make sure you have those things kind of covered to keep the doors open and keep the cash flowing.
Hook aside, because you brought up drivers and incentivizing and that kind of thing. You talked earlier about how we're still in a tough cycle where there's more supply than there is demand for freight, for transportation.
Yeah.
Can that be extrapolated for me to assume that from what you're seeing out there, there's more drivers than there are jobs?
I think there's always a talk about the driver shortage, right? Like that's been like, top 3 or top 5, from the ATA when they do their reports. It's always like, truck parking and, speed limiters and driver shortage is always like one of those things that come up. So I don't really believe there's a driver shortage per se. I think there's tons of drivers out there. I think there's a good driver shortage, right? For lack of a better word. There's tons of guys and gals out there with CDL licenses, but there's not a lot of great drivers out there. When I say great drivers, I just mean, drivers with clean license who are safe, who have a bunch of miles under their belt and don't have accidents and moving violations. And, there's a big problem with drugs in our industry, like, quite frankly, right? Like these different things that'll make a person with a CDL license not usable because their license isn't clean. So I think there's a lot of drivers out there, but I think the professional driver is scarce, right? The professional driver is scarce, and that's for a number of reasons. Number one, we don't have a lot of young people coming into the industry now, right? The average driver is probably 45, maybe to 48 to 50 years old plus, right? So, these guys are exiting the industry, right? And they're ready to get out and they're ready to retire. So in the next 10 years, when those guys retire and they leave, who's filling the gap? And these young kids now, they're on YouTube, they're doing TikToks for money. They're, into e-com, they're into AI, they're growing up differently. And even like a lot of the, second generation kind of businesses where you'll have a company who's been around for 50 plus years and they want to pass it on to the children. The children don't really want to run it. They're not interested in the business, right? So it's just like the passing of the guard. It's just like there's not a lot of newer drivers, not enough newer drivers coming into the industry. So I think that's where you have that disparity. And that's why we also have like that shortage. And then a lot of the newer people coming in, they don't see the job the same that a lot of the older guys saw it. Like a lot of these older guys saw it as a career, as a way of life, as something they'll do for 50 years until they retire. A lot of these younger guys come and see it. It's like a hustle. Like, let me just get in there. Let me do it for a couple of years, make some money, and then move on. Right. So maybe they're not, and that's not everybody. I don't ever mean to like, make it about like when I speak on one person, I'm saying that's everyone, because obviously there's always like exemptions up to the rule, but a lot of people come in and don't take the job seriously. So obviously that's gonna show in the performance, right? Like if you don't take this job seriously, you're not making sure your license is clean, you're not doing everything you could do to kind of protect that golden ticket. That's what I call it, in your pocket. Then you're not going to be the professional driver that you can be. So I think what needs to happen is the industry. It's not the driver's fault only. It's also the industry's fault, because they need to start finding a way to pay these guys more, to get these guys home more, to create a better quality of life for these drivers so that they can look at the job and not feel like, oh man, I can't, as soon as they get in, they can't wait to get out. Right. It's just a means to an end. It has to become a career again. We have to make this industry a career again, where drivers will come in and feel like, hey, this is something I can do for 20, 30 years and still be able to have family time, still be able to not have the physical demand, on my body that's going to beat me down over time and so forth. So, and that just takes time. There's no like overnight, answer to that. I don't know exactly how we do it, but that's what needs to happen, whether it's like shorter hauls where drivers aren't over the road as much and they're able to have more time at home. And it's just better pay packages, making sure that we're taking care of these guys from a healthcare perspective, just making sure that they're in good condition to have longevity. I think the industry needs to do a better job of that overall. And if we could do that, then it will incentivize more younger people to come in and want to join the industry. If they could see a path to like prosperity in this industry, because right now it doesn't look like it's not a job that a lot of people want to get into, because you see there's money there in some situations, but it's just not enough to deal with what you have to deal with as a driver. It's a very tough job, and I salute anybody who's out there on the road, putting in those hours, because it's not easy at all.
Do you think the approach do you think it's got to be solved by government? Do you God help us if that's the answer, but do you think the industry's got to figure out a way to do it? Do you think individual companies are going to lead the way? How do you think it'll play out?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, maybe there's some parameters that the government could kind of put in place to force, right, some companies to make some changes. But ultimately, I think it's a combination of both. I think the government can help, because if things are mandated, then obviously, like, businesses have to comply, right? And, I don't know what those things are, but let's say it's like hours of service changes and different things like that that'll impact the driver in their home time and so forth, right? Or there's like a certain amount of money that the driver has to make, or there's like overtime on like the tension, or different things like that could be put in place to where drivers are getting fairly compensated for a lot of the time that they spend on the road. Those things can be mandated, but then at the private level for these companies, obviously they have to not only comply with those changes, but also like, with those things, try implement additional things to make the driver's life easier, because it can't always be all in the government. At the end of the day, like you're working for a private company. They're going to make the rules, and whatever your way of life is going to be based on the kind of the rules they set forth. So I think it's a combination of both. I think it more so lies on the businesses to kind of make it happen.
Yes and no. I mean, let's step back from commercial driving.
Sure.
And let's look at, like, I grew up in New York City, okay? And I'm an old dinosaur.
What part?
In Manhattan.
Okay,
in
cool.
Manhattan. And you can't go anywhere there without seeing yellow taxis, right?
For sure.
Now there's green ones. But growing up as a kid, being a taxi driver was a chosen career, like being a baker, being a postman, being whatever, right? And I remember as a little kid getting in taxis, and you would meet somebody who'd been doing taxi driving for 35 years, own their own cab and that kind of thing. And the industry, individual companies changed the game so that by the time I left New York City about 15 years ago, taxi driving, all the medallions were owned by a few companies.
Yep.
And they hired drivers, and they had pay arrangements where it was like, you're going to rent the taxi for 12 hours for a fee, and whatever you make above your fee is yours, and we're going to take a credit card percentage. And it very much became an arm's length thing. And I don't know if the people driving taxis at that point were thinking of it as a career or just, this is how I'm going to go make money, right? And then Uber at the same time was completely upsetting the apple cart. And the gig economy took over. You got a car? We're going to completely disrupt the taxi industry. And in cities around the country and in the world, Uber completely changed the model. And I don't think taxi companies operate the way they used to in anything close to the word. I think they're just a variation of Uber now, but they're more regulated.
For sure.
Is there going to be a disruption in commercial transportation and trucking similar to what Uber did, in the sense that they're going to push it even more towards the gig world, where someone could say, yeah, I got a CDL. I don't feel like working Tuesday, but I'll put in 10 hours on Thursday, or I've got a part-time job. I'll put in 2 hours here and there. Or is it, I mean, I don't, because, the incentives are there for companies to do different things. And
yeah,
I'm sure we don't have the answer, but there's an interesting parallel there, I would think.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting question. And I think that there are probably people who have looked at that. I don't think it could really happen because, so there's a few different things. So you talked about a few companies owning like all the taxi companies, right? So like a consolidation of a few companies, now they own all the taxi companies. And in the trucking industry, number one, that's not something that we want to see, right? Because consolidation isn't good for the industry, because that hurts the small carriers, right? Which represent 95% of the industry, right? So and that will put a bunch of people out of business. So we don't really want to see that. So that's one thing. The second is,
well, wait a minute though.
Yeah.
Economically speaking, an extremely diverse supplier market can often lead to large shippers having controlling pricing power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Amazon loves a diverse market because they do everything basically like an auction. If you look at the way Amazon does things, it's very much spot driven. But even outside of the transportation world, their attitude has always been voracious. We're giant. We're going to flex our leverage, and we love having a million suppliers who can provide goods on our platform. And if the guy doesn't like the price, there's someone willing to take their spot in a heartbeat. To
which is a trucking industry right now.
Right. So what counters that, if not some consolidation to flex back?
I hear what you're saying, but the only problem is when you have consolidation, that puts small business owners out of business.
Or right? They get so out, which is not the worst thing.
Yeah, possibly, but I think that eventually the thing is like some people get bought out and some people get left behind, right? Sure. So it doesn't work for everybody. Yeah, some people will be able to have an exit, and they may be able to have an event where they could finally say, "Oh man, I'm done with this. take my money and go somewhere on the beach. But a lot of people will just not have the opportunity to now compete, right? And we never want to have, a monopoly, in the industry. And that's what deregulation was about, right? To where we don't have monopolies and there's not a couple of businesses who just control everything. So I think that I get what you're saying, because for, like you said, the Amazon, for the shippers, yeah, they can just kind of put it out there. Now everybody's competing. It's like a race to the bottom, so to speak, right? But at the same time, there has to be like some sort of balance, because that's also not good for small businesses, because now small business owners can't, open up trucking companies. And now that will shift that 95% to, 50%. Right now, there's no small businesses out there. And now there's the Schneiders and everybody of the world and the JB Hunts. They're controlling everything. And now that doesn't give the small business owner opportunity for free enterprise. So for me, as an advocate for entrepreneurs, I would never want to see a corporation be in position to take opportunities from small businesses. There should always be competition out there. But what could happen, though, or what should happen, is maybe on the other side of it, the Amazons of the world aren't allowed to create that marketplace where it's the race to the bottom, right? Like maybe that's the problem that needs to be fixed, and not the fact that there's consolidation and then it kind of weans out those small carriers trying to compete, if that makes sense.
It does. But I read Craig Fuller's Freight Waves, and they've got
for sure
sonar.
Sonar.
And I'm fascinated because in the transportation industry, you have such highs and lows because of the supply-demand mismatches.
Yep.
And on Wall Street, we'd call it a duration mismatch, because the shippers can adjust their shipping needs day to day based on how much freight they've got to move. But there's a big lag time between when people go, ooh, rates are up, I'm going to get a truck and get into business and get my CEOs and hire my drivers and commit to a loan and all this other stuff. Because, the other parallel, do you remember the WeWork story?
Yeah. Yep.
You had that huge high-flying startup that was renting entire floors in office buildings at a lower rate by buying in bulk, 6 floors, and then renting out a desk, an office, a conference room, whatever, by the hour for a huge multiple. Yep. They had a duration mismatch because they were committing to the asset payment, the long-term lease, and there was huge demand for this, for individual desks and mini offices or whatever was driving it.
And COVID.
And then COVID hit, and nobody wanted an office space, and they had a problem because they were on the hook for these things. Same thing happens in the transportation industry. You get some entrepreneur who says, I'm going to go lease or buy X numbers of trucks and commit all this capital because things are going good. And then the freight market changes, but they still have all this equipment debt, right? All the capital.
Yeah.
How do we begin to address that? Because it will keep repeating.
It's a great argument. And I mean, you make a really, really good point. I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, ultimately, that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's about calculated risk, right? It's like, if you want to get into the business, you get into the business knowing that there is potential for failure, right? Like, obviously nobody wants to embrace that or feel like that's what's going to happen, but there is potential for failure. So you have to do the best job of gathering as much information as you can to make the best move for yourself at that time. But I agree. I mean, it what you're saying is true, but isn't that the same with any business?
By the way, I'm laughing because I can see over your shoulder why you called it truck and hustle.
Why? What do you see?
If you buy a truck, you better hustle.
Yeah. No, 100%. You have to. I mean, but that's the risk you take in starting any business, man. Ultimately, you have to commit to purchasing something, whether it's goods or whether it's real estate or whatever the case may be. And then whatever happens in the world happens, and you have to adapt to that. So I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, that's a part of the risk of being an entrepreneur and starting a business, regardless in what industry you start a business in. Can you tell me a business where it's guaranteed that you're going to have somebody buying or there's going to be a revenue stream? There's never guaranteed.
No. And in fact, the pattern repeats over and over again. I used to be a floor trader. I traded options on the American Stock Exchange, colored
Okay.
jacket, the hand signals, all that nonsense. And we saw the same cycle. When it was boom time, there was liquidity in the market. There was a lot of trading. There was activity. There was volume. All of a sudden, the floor would be packed with brokers and market makers and proprietary traders doing all this stuff, and there'd be activity. And then the volume would fall off for whatever reason for 8, 9, 10, 12 months, a year, whatever. And all of a sudden, a year later, there'd be half as many people on the floor trying to earn a living.
Yep.
Right? The same boom bust cycle. They talk about it in the fishing industry. There's, whether it's the deadliest catch kind of thing where they got all these boats chasing and, the crab are over here and then they overfish it and then there's no fish for a number of years, right? And then everybody's got boat payments and nobody's got work and you see it everywhere. How do we, if we want to be responsible members of the community and educate people who are entrepreneurs thinking about getting into this, how do we get the word out? Because it seems to me the problem is everybody's running into it when it looks good.
Yeah.
And then you end up with a lot of broken dreams, a lot of heartache, a lot of lost capital when too many people get into it. How do we educate them? I mean, maybe this goes to the question of what are the mistakes you see people making? And is it just that there's too many people crowding into the same trade?
Yeah, well, number one, I think you just have to really just understand what you're getting into. Like really do some really deep market research and understand, it's not about going out and buying a truck or a trailer. Anybody could do that, right? That's the easy part. Like getting your authority, that's easy. Anybody could do that. But it's really about understanding like what is going to be your niche? Who is your buyer? What are you selling? Right? What is your differentiators? What's going to make you stand out? Just like in any other business, like if you're going to open up like a bagel shop on a street full of bagel shops, what makes your bagel different than every other bagel? You have to really figure this. It's the same in this industry. You're a business at the end of the day, and you have to understand how am I going to make money, right? How am I going to make money? How am I going to differentiate myself? What's my core offerings, and what's going to make me stand out? And I think a lot of people, like you said, if you're running to it because you see a boom, you're probably getting into it for the wrong reasons, right? Because you're just getting into it because you see an opportunity and you're trying to jump on that opportunity, but you haven't done your research to understand, okay, what about when there is that bust? What about when things do go bad? How am I going to then, make sure that we can sustain this business? Do I have enough capital? Do I have enough, of a safety net put away to be able to still run this business? You have to always plan on worst case scenario. And I think that's what a lot of people fail to do. And I think that's what happened, over the last couple of years with all these, new entrants going out of business in 1 to 2 years, is they didn't plan to fail. They didn't plan for this cycle when everything went bust. They saw the boom, they saw everybody making money. They were talking to their friends. They were talking to other, owner operators and other people who had small companies. And, they were listening to the dream that they were selling them and they got in and they just got in over their heads. But I think now, I don't think that will happen again. Right. Because I think that now people are realizing that, okay, we saw what happened with all of those people, those new entrants and all the struggles that they had. Let's be a little bit more cautious this time, if we want to get into this. Or is this industry really for me? Understand, is this a business I really want to start?
I would love to make a friendly bet with you on that.
You think it'll happen again?
I think it'll happen again with different people.
Because it's just the nature of people, you're saying?
It's just the nature of people. The people who have the scars from the first time won't make the same mistake.
Sure.
But other people will see the boom. And what's the expression? Fools rush in. By the way, once you see the boom, in any business I've been in, once you see the boom, it's gone. It's like a sonic boom.
Yeah.
The plane's already past you when you hear the boom, right?
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. And there's just a lot of scars out there, man. There's just a lot of scars and a lot of war wounds out there. So you're right. There always will be new people who come in, who missed that last opportunity. You're like, oh man, I'm getting in this time. But hopefully the word will have gotten out enough, right, from people who suffered, that those people who are seeing this big boom will say, hold up, I heard about something happening in 2020, in 2021, and 22 and 23. And let me go do my research on that, right? Because now it's like it's a little it's documented, and it's been documented before. Because this isn't the first time we had this type of situation, right? It's not the first time, but for these newer entrepreneurs that are coming up now, there's some documentation for them to look at that has happened in recent history that they can say, you know what, let me be a little bit more cautious, or let me just tread a little bit more lightly before I put all my eggs in this basket.
And this is why I love what you do, Rahmel, because you're out there telling the stories, right? You're keeping the memory alive. What happens, what I've seen, human nature, if entrepreneur A is thinking of getting into the trucking space, and they go to a meeting and they talk to entrepreneurs B, C, and D who say, listen, slow down, Tiger. There's a lot of risk here. But entrepreneur A read about how it's boom time.
Yeah.
They think B, C, and D are lying to them because they don't want another player in the space.
Right. They don't want competition.
Exactly.
They walk away like, well, why are you in it, right? Like if it's so bad, why are you here, right? So yeah, I get it.
And so that's why I would happily take a even odd bet that we're going to see another boom bust cycle in our lifetime for sure.
Yeah. No, I got you. And it may happen, but like I said, hopefully that there's a memory of Christmas past, and they say, man, let me reflect a little bit and do some research, and it won't be as bad, right? Because it's going to happen, but I don't think it'll be as bad as what we've seen in the last few years.
Well, certainly COVID was like a megaphone. It was a magnifier, right?
100%. 100%.
We never see another COVID.
So we have a reference point now, right? Because now everybody could say, hey, what if another COVID happens? Then what, right? So it's like, and I mean, initially COVID was great for the industry, right?
Oh,
yeah. But then it just shifted the world, right? Like it's since COVID, this world has not been the same. Everything's just changed, right? I don't know what it is. I don't know if we're living in a simulation now or what's going on. But if you could just really reflect to that day, whatever it was, March 20th or whatever, when everything just really like stopped in 2020 and people started going home from work and everything just shut down. And it's like the world has never recovered from that since then.
Well, and I think too, transportation after this incredible party, which it was between the boom in demand,
yep,
and then gifts from the gods in the form of PPP loans and EIDL.
Exactly. A whole bunch of money pumped in the system. It was crazy.
It's the ultimate hangover.
Right? Yes.
There was a Fed president years ago. I think his name was William McChesney Martin. He said the job of the Fed is to take away the punch bowl before the party gets out of hand. And it's kind of the same parallel to what happened with COVID and transportation. The party got out of hand. I mean, if I'm too old to consider what this would feel like now, but as a young person, if somebody said, let's go to Miami and party it up till 6 a.m. for 2 nights straight, I'd say yes. Now,
right.
55, when I think about that, my body cringes to think what that flight home would feel like, right?
100%.
And I think that transportation's going through a lot of that flight home from the Miami party, And
it is, man. It is. And it's taken some time to recover. And it's hard, man, because, I talk to a ton of entrepreneurs and a ton of aspiring entrepreneurs as well. And, the sentiment is just, it's just like gloom, man. It's gloom. It's just a really tough time that we're going through. But, we try to be real about what's going on. Like, we don't ever want to like paint it like, hey, man, it's all rainbows and whatever over here. Like, we want to be real because these are people who are investing their, hard-earned money into these businesses and so forth. But at the same time, we want to still feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel because it's not going anywhere. We can all we can all agree to that, right? Like the industry is not going anywhere. So what you have to do is find your niche, find your place, find where you can provide a service, be of service, because we know that the industry is not going anywhere. So it's just figuring out where you can play and where you can have some success.
And in your role in the community, much bigger community than ours, but I think that we're on the same page that as commentators, as I don't want to say influencers, but we want to be responsible because I meet people who are hardworking, entrepreneurial, And I want to do two things to help them. I want to encourage them in that entrepreneurial spirit, because
Yes.
I'm an entrepreneur and I'm sick of other people. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. The whole entrepreneur mindset is ignore them. You can do it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you don't need somebody throwing cold water on it. But at the same time, since we've seen the stories, we've lived them, we've experienced the pain, we want to be like almost like a caring friend or sibling or parent or something, to say, hey, go for it, but
For sure.
prepare for the journey, because it's not all roses and unicorns.
Yeah, for sure. No, and I think we have that responsibility, right? Like, we have the responsibility of people who have a voice, number one, a voice that people listen to, and, they may make decisions based on our words and based on what we the narrative that we put out there. So I think it's very important to make sure that you're showing both sides, and that you, like you said, you encourage, but at the same time, you let them know, like, hey, listen, this isn't,
Eyes wide
this
open.
isn't easy. This is going to be a struggle. You kind of prepare them for the worst, right? I like to try to talk people out of it, honestly. Like, man, you might not want to do this, right? Like, I'm going to tell you every reason why you shouldn't do it. And then if you still move forward, at least I feel like, okay, well, I gave them every reason that I know why they shouldn't move forward. If they still move forward, then their heart is really in it. They're passionate about this. And 9 times out of 10, they may have some moderate success, right? Because they know what can happen, and they're still willing to push forward. So I think you're right. I think we do have a responsibility to do that. But at the same time, the spirit of entrepreneurship, man, is just such a beautiful thing, man. I think I love entrepreneurial people. I love people with that mindset who just want to start and build businesses. So I'm going to always root for you. I'm going to always tell you could do it. Like, that's just, naturally, inherently who I am. I'm not going to say, no, you can't, because I've been in those shoes where someone has told me that's not a good idea. You should probably stay at your job a little bit longer. Don't quit yet. Like, different things like that to make me feel like, I would never tell anybody that, because I've been in those shoes and I didn't want to hear that at that time. I needed encouragement. I needed somebody to tell me, yeah, you're doing the right thing. You're going to make it happen. You can be successful. If you just do this, this, and this, man, in a couple of years, man, you're going to be doing great. That's what I needed to hear. Not somebody to, kind of make me feel as if I was doing the wrong thing. So, yeah, I mean, we have an interesting job, but it's fun, man. Somebody's got to do it.
Do you run into the same categories of people that I do? There's some people who say, screw John Hawley, I don't ever want to hear a word from him. Okay. There's other people who listen to what I say and go, I'm not listening to any of that. Then there's people who listen and go, you're right. And then they do the opposite. And then there's some people who actually listen. And then those are my favorites, because they come back and they say, you saved me a lot of pain. You helped me on my learning curve.
You know what? That's a great question, John. That's really a great question, because I think our platform has done and I don't want to say a good job, but I think what we've become as a platform is more so just a resource of just a wealth of information, right? So we're not necessarily pointing anybody in any direction. We're not saying do or don't, right? And kind of like my POV is never like do or don't. It's more so just like, and like when I was talking to you about, I'm talking to personal friends who are looking to get in. I'm telling them, like, but as far as a platform, what I'm saying to the world, I'm just presenting you what's going on. I'm presenting to you, here are the stories, here are the people, here's what he said, here's what she said, here's this opportunity, here's that opportunity. I'm not telling you to get involved in any of them, but I'm telling you what is happening, and you can decide if you're interested in it or not, right? So from my perspective, I can't really say that no one says, I don't want to hear anything that you say, because that's not the way I present. It's more so like, here, do this if you want, or if you don't want to, that's cool. But here it is. Check it out. Right? It's more of like, check it out. Check it out. It's if this is for you, it's for you. If it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't, you can move on and watch another video, come to another event, do something else. But we're not forcing anything on you. Like for example, with you, you talk a lot about linehaul, right? You talk a lot about FedEx. So you're speaking on a lot of the positive or the good reasons to get involved with linehaul. And somebody may say, John, that's BS. There's no way I can make money in linehaul. I did this research and da-da-da-da-da. It's impossible. I'd rather do whatever. And then somebody could say, hey, I did some research and I listened to you and I got into linehaul and it was great. So, right. So you have that kind of like those two different sides of the coin. Whereas for me, I'm just throwing different opportunities out there for you and just telling you about it. So you have no reason to be mad at me.
No, but no, I've watched a lot of your stuff, and
Okay.
and it reminds me of something. My father, rest his soul, he said to me when I was young, and it took me probably 40 years to understand what he was really talking about.
Okay.
He said, son, there's three kinds of people in this world. There's dumb people who don't learn from their own mistakes. There's smart people who learn from their mistakes. And there's really smart, even wise people, and they learn from other people's mistakes. And I
like
think
that.
what you're doing, the appeal, your audience is wise people who are trying to avoid having to pay full price for mistakes by learning from other people who pay full price.
I love that.
That's your core audience.
I love that, and I agree with you. I agree with you. These are the people who are interested, inquisitive, people who are like, let me hear this story. So, like you said, I don't have to pay and make the same mistake that they did. And I think that's a great service, right? Because, like you said, there's not a lot of places where you can watch somebody's story and just really get to understand the ins and outs of what they went through their entire journey. And if you're approaching that, or you want to get into that same kind of thing, you kind of have a blueprint, right? Like you're not gonna learn everything, but you can get an idea of what it may look like for you, and just kind of make some decisions after you hear that. So yeah, I like that.
And I will tell you, in my little pocket, we got this big show coming up, right?
Okay.
I get asked by people all the time, what separates the really good contractors from the not so good contractors?
I like that.
And
it's a good question.
Well, it's exactly what my old man told me 40 plus years ago. The really good contractors are paying really close attention to what they can learn from other folks to avoid the $20,000, the $200,000 mistake. They're the ones getting ahead because they don't have to pay full price to learn lessons. They're listening to the stories. Yeah. That separates the great ones from the not so great.
And that's why it's so important what you do, John, right? Because you're creating a platform for that, to hear these stories, for people to be able to learn. So it's extremely important what you do.
And keep in mind, I'm not one of those smart people. I'm on volume 12, book 16, chapter 32 of me not paying attention to what I've learned from other people and having to make the same mistake in order to be able to internalize it and not do it again. I think I'm safely out of the dumb bucket because I don't tend to make the same mistake twice, but I am fundamentally incapable of learning from the mistakes of others. And this is what scares me a little bit. For a lot of entrepreneurs, they're in that middle camp because they trust themselves. It's that strong autonomous gene. I can figure it out. I've been told I can't do this by so many people. I'm not going to listen to them. And it's very hard for us to take the blinders off as an entrepreneur and actually pay attention to what other people are doing so that we don't have to learn it the hard way.
Yeah, man. You're right. You're right. You have to have a little bit of that in you, but you can't have it to a fault. Right. You have to have a little bit of that. Like, I don't care what anybody says. The blinders are on. I'm going to push forward. But again, you can definitely have that to a fault. And if you do, it's not going to work out well for you. If you have the opportunity to learn from people, you have to, man.
I mean, how many times have we seen someone, a peer or someone we know, go try to do something entrepreneurial and fail? And our response is, he's an idiot. I could have done well there. Right? That's the confidence you need to have, right?
Yeah.
And yet, like, maybe they're as talented as you and they actually ran into a brick wall and you're going to do the same damn thing.
For sure. But it's for sure. And sometimes it's not even about talent. It's just about a set of circumstances, right? Like, it's like they can be doing everything right, quote unquote, but then something just happens in the business that they can't recover from. You know, and you may look at it on the outside looking in as a failure, but maybe something happened catastrophic that they just weren't they weren't in position to cover from. They never saw that coming. Right. So it's like, it can be anything. It can be anything.
You know, interesting parallel that I had to learn when I was on Wall Street. Trying to identify who was a good trader. Okay. And this is all about statistics and probability, but the way I like to explain it now that it's been ingrained in my head by a mentor of mine. You could take someone who puts on a lousy trade and makes a ton of money because it happens to go their way. So, simple example. I tell you, I'm going to roll a dice. You got a 1 in 6 chance of guessing which number comes up. Okay. And if you're right, I'll give you $1 million. If you're wrong, you owe me $1 million. Statistically, you don't take that trade because you got a 1 in 6 chance with a chance of doubling your money. It's a loser trade, right?
For sure.
Now, there are traders on Wall Street who take that trade and the number comes up. And everybody says, oh, he's a great trader.
He's a genius. Yep.
Right? Because you don't hear about the 5 who took the trade and the number didn't come up. They just disappear out the back door.
That's right.
Alternatively, the great traders are always out there looking for a bet that's lopsided in their favor. So they're looking for a bet where if the number comes up, they get a big payout. But if any of the other 5 numbers come up, they're not out $1 million. Right? The traders who are there long term, they could have lousy outcomes, right? If the bet is, if any of these 5 numbers come up, I'll give you $1 million. If the other number comes up, you owe me $1 million. You'll put that trade on in size, right?
That's right.
But you have a 1 in 6 chance of losing $1 million. So that's a lousy outcome, but a great trade. And I think as entrepreneurs, we have to not focus on the outcome. Did you get paid or not? But you have to look at it without ego involved and say, did I put on a good bet? Did I put my chips in the smart way? Did I hedge against this eventuality smart? Because even though sometimes it goes against you, if it's a good bet, you want to make it over and over again because it'll come your way over time, right?
Yes, sir.
And
yes,
I
sir.
think for your audience, I would bet that the smarter ones are thinking that way. Yes, sometimes I get bloodied and bruised with a trade, with a business I try. But that's circumstances. It's something I couldn't control. But if the odds were in my favor, I got to keep doing it. I got to keep trying, right?
Right. Because all you got to do is win once. You got to be right once.
But I tell you, the ones who are putting on stupid bets, you can set your watch. At some point, they're going to exit stage left.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you put that beautifully, John. I like that. I like that.
Last topic I'd love to talk to you. You've been very generous with your time, Rahmel. Thank you.
Sure. I'm having fun.
In the linehaul world, and I told you I didn't want to talk about linehaul, and here I go. I'm sorry. Broken record.
Okay.
Safety's everything these days. Insurance, nuclear verdicts, workers' comp, you name it. Safety is playing a bigger role. Is that happening in all of the other pockets of transportation?
100%. I mean, there's nuclear verdicts, insurance costs are through the roof. We're seeing more nuclear verdicts. So it's the same exact thing. That translates into traditional, trucking as well.
Where do you think it's going? How do you think it ends? Does it find a natural balance? Has the pendulum swung too far? Or is it correct that the cost should be this high? Does legislation have to come in to stop with the nuclear stuff? Where does it go from here?
I mean, the nuclear stuff is interesting because it's like, how do you put a price on somebody's life or an event that happens? Like, I can't say that, when a family of 4 was killed, that they don't deserve $100 million or $300 million, right? Like, we can't say that there's no price that you could put on a life. So that's like a conversation where it gets a little bit dicey. But what we can do is we need to just start thinking more safety. Like, safety has to really become a priority in these businesses, and it's not. Safety is something that's a buzzword that everybody talks about. Everybody says, safety, 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 but nobody's really, not nobody, but a lot of people aren't really creating strong safety cultures in their businesses. And they're not spending enough time focusing on safety. They're not investing in safety. They're not investing in driver training. They're not making sure that they have safe drivers out there. They're not making sure they have safe equipment out there. All these things that cause these problems. So it's like the root cause. What's the root cause of all this? Because the nuclear verdicts and all that's going to happen. The insurance prices are going to rise. All that's going to happen. But if we can stop the events from happening from the beginning and start, then we can we could address the other side of it. So we have to address these barriers to make sure that we're doing everything we can do and prioritizing safety for real. And I think that's where it really starts. And then we clean up our front lawn first, and then we can start addressing everything else. But we have to clean up our front lawn, because if we're not making any changes at home, we can't really talk about the insurance companies and all that kind of stuff, right? So we have to fix our front yard first.
100% agree. Absolutely 100% agree. We have a responsibility in this industry to do everything we can to reduce risk.
Yep.
Another guest that I spoke to recently, Alan Schwartz, he said, let's stop with the word safe, because it's not safe. You have an
never been safe
8,000-pound torpedo going down a highway with
there you
other cars. It's not safe. Let's talk about risk minimization, risk management. What can we live with? But the thing I would go back to is, I do think there's something that can be done with nuclear verdicts. And I don't have it all worked out, but here's the thing. It's a tragedy when someone loses their life. You can't put a price on it.
right?
But you can acknowledge that someone else in a vehicle on a highway is accepting that there's some risk. They're not completely blind to this. There's nothing written in the Constitution that says if you get in a car and get on the highway and you're going 70 miles an hour down the highway, you're guaranteed an absolutely risk-free experience.
Yeah.
So I do think that in many cases, the nuclear verdicts have swung a little too far.
I don't necessarily disagree, but again, it's like it sounds good until that's your family, right? Who's in that position, and then all that is out the window, right? Like if your 17 or 18-year-old daughter or son is driving, and no, they didn't put themselves in a position to be on that road with that person who was driving fatigue or, out of hours or whatever happened to cause this incident. And your family deserves every bit of that, because now they're no longer here because of that act. So it's like we can look at that kind of both ways. And I get what you're saying. I mean, I think a lot of it just sounds, and another thing on the nuclear verdict side, a lot of times that those big numbers aren't even collected. Like, they're numbers that's kind of put out there, but that's not even really what's paid to the family at the end of the day. It's just more so like, it's like ambulance chasing, like promoting these big numbers. And it's so many people who are getting paid in these scenarios, like the lawyers and all that. And the family's not even getting really what they deserve, right? Or the person who was involved that the verdict was for. So, I mean, it's a tough question, but I mean, obviously it affects everything. When you have these nuclear verdicts, now insurance companies have the right to say, hey, your insurance premiums have to go up. What, look, everybody's causing accidents out there. Look at what you guys are doing. It's not us. It's so it's like, it needs to definitely be addressed in some way. And I don't have the answer either, but I think that safety is just a tough thing. And what you said was right on point. It's not safe. It's not safe. It's never been safe, right? Like, there's nothing safe about it. The companies have a responsibility. Drivers have a responsibility. Even the cars on the road, the civilians, I call them, they have a responsibility as well to make sure that they respect this 80,000-pound missile coming down the road on the left and to the right of them, right? Like, even like if you look at a person who's a new driver who just got their driver's license, are they getting trained on how to interact with a 18-wheeler on the road or a Class 8 vehicle? You know what I'm saying? Like, do they even understand what can happen as a result of them, not yielding to that driver? How hard it is for that truck to stop? Like all these different things that they need to know. If they're not educated and the fear isn't instilled within them, or the responsibility isn't instilled within them as drivers, just handing out licenses, and now you have all these new drivers on the road who don't respect the trucker, it's a recipe for disaster. It's going to happen. So there's a lot that needs to change. It will take time, but I think as a professionals, we have to start at the carrier level and make sure that they're doing everything that they can do, because a lot of times when you hear about these accidents, in a lot of cases they could have done something differently to prevent it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a defensive driver instructor. I'm Smith System certified, so I teach defensive driving all the time. And one of the things that they always would teach us when you're being trained to be an instructor is nothing just happens. Like, there's always a reason why an accident happens. Like, a lot of guys will say, well, he just came out of nowhere, or it just I don't know what happened. There's really no such thing as he came out of nowhere, right? There's always, in most cases, unless like something falls out the sky or a car comes off the top of a bridge, it's always preventable in some way, right? And maybe it was following distance. Maybe you weren't looking ahead far enough. Maybe you weren't keeping space on the left or right of you. right? Maybe you weren't making eye contact when, you were crossing, this intersection and you didn't look to, there's all these different things that you could have done that if you were trained and that you were taking this stuff into consideration, you would have prevented that incident or accident, right? There's always a way to prevent an accident in most cases. So it's just a matter of just taking safety more seriously. And then like even for the carriers, they got to take care of these trucks, man. Like, making sure like these pre-trips are done properly. When these drivers turn in these DVIRs, they're actually fixing the things that are being turned in. Like I've seen so many times where a driver will turn the DVIR and the company just take it, like, all right, we'll fix it when it gets back. There's the tire is flat, there's is limping to the warehouse. The brakes, something wrong with the brake chamber. There's an air leak. There's all these different things that these trucks get sent out on the road in just because the load has to get there. We don't want to be late. We don't want to upset the customer. We got to get there on time. And the driver has that pressure of feeling like they can't really report anything or they can't do anything because they got to go out there. They got to make their money. Now they got to deal with their dispatcher or their company's mouth because they have to get that load there because it's time sensitive. And they don't even feel comfortable reporting incidents correctly. Right. And then like if the truck is down, like the company's like, we can't afford to have that truck down. We got to get a replacement. That's time. It's just so much we have to change about the way we look at things, because if you would have taken that time to fix that problem, it may have taken an additional 5 or 6 hours or whatever the case may be. But that may be one life that wasn't taken on the road because of something silly that could have been fixed right there and then and there. Right. So it's just. And so everybody has to change their mindset around it. Like the shippers and the brokers have to be more understanding, and everybody has to just be like, all right, our priority is safety. If there's anything going on, everything stops. But how do we ever have a world like that when there's so many different stakeholders involved that don't really care about your safe truck? They just care about it getting there. Yeah. Right? Like you should have taken care of that yesterday. We don't care about the fact that that's a problem today. Just get our load there. And if you can't do it, we'll get somebody else who can. So if that's the mentality, it's hard to put safety first because now you're impacting and you're putting your operation in danger and so now you put the operation before safety. And I've seen that happen for years. I've been in this industry for 20 plus years. I've worked for Ryder for 7 years. I worked for small mom and pop companies. I've run my own business, and safety is always, everybody says safety first, but nobody ever puts safety first. Guaranteed. I've seen it. Nobody puts safety first. When it comes down to safety over making money, the money always comes first.
Rahmel, I got to send you the link to the conversation with Alan Schwartz, where he talked about, he's the guy who broke the concussion story for the New York Times. I mean, the parallels in my mind, when you think about drivers and football players, teams and contractors, carriers and the league, right? There's so many organizational incentives to get it done. Don't worry about the risk. And it was a fascinating conversation with him about that. You're going to love seeing that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would love to hear it and see it for sure. But it's the truth, man. If you've been around this industry long enough to see what happens inside those offices and the discussions and what really, really goes on, you can see why it's so unsafe out there. You can see why every single day you wake up to a truck accident. It's very obvious. It's not hard. You know what I mean? Because that's the culture that these companies are building, and it's going to translate into an incident, into an accident, into a nuclear verdict. It's just a matter of time. It's not when, but it's not if, it's when. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Speaking of time, I know you've got a hard stop coming up. Before we sign off, for folks who want to learn more about Rahmel Wattley and Truck and Hustle, what's the best way for them to get involved in your community?
Yeah, so one, if you want to just reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn, Rahmel Wattley. That's where I'm most active. So just RahmelWattley. And you can learn more about, what I do there. I post there kind of regularly. The best way to kind of connect and learn about our content is through YouTube. We're on YouTube. Go to Truck, TRUCK, the letter N, Hustle. And then we're, just like the shirt. Just like the shirt, Truck and Hustle. And then we're on all platforms, man. Like I said, we do, a ton of news. We do, just different styles of content, podcasts. We do live events as well. We have a conference that we call Freight Fest that we put on. So we do a ton of stuff. So if you want to kind of get into our world and just learn about our ecosystem and what we're building, we also just launched our own private community for entrepreneurs. So we call it TNHEC, Truck and Hustle Entrepreneurs Community for Entrepreneurs in Motion. So any place where you're at in the journey, if you're looking to kind of, you're in transition, you're looking for new opportunities, you're looking to grow your business, you want to connect with like-minded people who are in the industry, who are kind of going through the same things that you're going through, that's the place to be, man. We're having some mentorship, some training in there, just a great group of people who are like-minded, who want to kind of learn from each other and help each other as a resource. And we're having a lot of fun in there. So you can check that out. That's the Truck and Hustle Entrepreneurs Community. You can find that on all of our links as well. And that's it, man. Otherwise, like I say, connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to give me a shout out. I love to hear from you guys.
Rahmel, thank you for doing such great work for this community. And thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you got a million things going on, and it's very generous of you to come talk to me for over an hour. So a million.
Man, thank you for the time. I appreciate it, sir. This was fun. This is really a great conversation. I love to do it again. And I'd love to have you on Truck and Hustle as well to talk about. We did a live together. We did a live together about a year or so ago. So we got to do something else, man, really soon. I know our community would love to hear from you again.
Anytime. Thank you.